for the most part, most companies are thinking agility is the best way to counter the increasing exponential changes that are coming our way. And that's good, but I was just with the Fortune 50 CIOs in a meeting held by Cisco, and so we have the largest CIOs in the world there, and I just asked them, how many of you already have an Agile organization? They all put their hands up, and I said, well, that's good. I mean, there's no competitive advantage, obviously, but that's good. Being Agile is good, but once again, the guys who started Uber didn't use agility to come up with Uber, and the guys who came up with Airbnb didn't use agility to come up with their concepts, and so on. But they will help you react faster, which is good. There will continue to be a lot of incoming change. One last one I'll point out is execution. And we all think execution is everything. But I would say BlackBerry was really good at execution, and so is Microsoft, Dell, Sony, HP, and a host of others that have been struggling. So what is the missing competency? And the missing competency is the ability to anticipate. And anticipate what? You can anticipate disruptions before they disrupt. You can anticipate problems before you have them so that you can pre-solve them. And you can anticipate game-changing opportunities before the competition notices if you have a methodology. And that is what I'd love to talk to our listeners about today, is to help teach them some of that methodology.
Hello, I'm Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. I've not been able to produce the show for a couple weeks, and I apologize. I am just getting back from the Singularity University Worldwide Summit, of which I'm the Washington, D.C. chapter ambassador for. So I was busy learning, and then I met my wife for a cool trip. I haven't been away in a couple years for just a solo trip with her. And I've been speaking on a variety of topics related to educating organizations on exponential technologies with my new role as chapter ambassador, and then also continue to navigate enterprise IT security and using my company to develop solutions for enterprise IT leaders. But now I'm back, and I have a great bunch of interviews that I can't wait to release to you. Today, my guest is Daniel Burrus. He's a keynote speaker, business strategist, and global futurist. Very interesting. He has over 800,000 followers on LinkedIn. So go find him on LinkedIn. So out of the 300 million plus LinkedIn profiles, he's in the top 35. This is stunning. But wait, once I go through this bio, you'll begin to understand a little bit. He's just been in this forever. He's considered one of the world's leading futurists on global trends and innovation. The New York Times has referred to him as one of the top 3 business gurus in the highest demand as a speaker. And he's spoken over 2,700 times. He's a strategic advisor to executives from Fortune 500 companies, helping them to develop game-changing strategies based on his proven methodologies for capturing on technology innovation and their future impact. He's the author of 6 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller Flash Foresight, as well as the highly acclaimed Techno Trends. And it's really interesting. If you go to his website, you'll see he published these 20 technology trends in the 80s, and you can map these out. He's mapped them from what he actually said and did with these technologies in the 80s and where he said they were going to go. And it's really uncanny, his predictions. As a business strategist, he's helped hundreds of clients profit from new opportunities and develop successful competitive business strategies. And he's a thought leader and contributing writer on topics of innovation, change, and the future for Harvard Business Review, Huffington Post, Wired Magazine, Examiner.com, to name a few. He's founded 6 businesses, 4 of which were national leaders in the United States in the first year. He's CEO of Burrus Research, a research and consulting firm that monitors global advancement and technology-driven trends. I put on my podcast app, my team put on there the major takeaways from this episode. I think there's 13. A couple I thought that most important was how you develop an anticipatory organization versus agile. And he interviews CIOs and talks about building anticipatory organizations versus agile, which I found fascinating. And then also how to determine a hard versus soft trend and what to do about it. So I like Dan because he really gets into showing how and talking about how he does this, and not just saying that, come to me, I know the future, but teaching people how to protect the future. And then how do you lessen the risk in the investments you're making in the future based on what type of a trend you're currently looking at. So it's really fascinating. I encourage you to go to the podcast app, and you can scroll down to see the rest of these takeaways if you're interested, or just listen to the show. So go to redzonetech.net/podcast if you want to download the transcript. If you're a business IT leader in particular, or a direct report to the CEO or a startup, this interview is really money in the bank for you. So you can go and download the transcript that's been transcribed from this show. You can also follow me on Twitter and make any comments you'd like. I'd love to hear from you at @BeExponential, or you can go to LinkedIn where you can also follow me there. Your comments are my oxygen. I appreciate all of them in advance. And needless to say, I'm excited to bring to you my interview with Daniel Burrus. Please enjoy. Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interviewed leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. I want to welcome you to the show today.
Great. Well, thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's a real pleasure because I recently took on the role of Singularity University's DC chapter ambassador. And so I've really gone deeply into learning about some of the exponential technology trends and such, coupled with kind of a native background with my business building within enterprise IT security. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is how business IT leaders are really thinking differently about the future. And what do you see as one of the key skills that is needed for IT business leaders and C-suite executives to have moving forward?
Well, what I've been teaching is what I call the missing competency. And to set this up, let's just take a look at some of the key strategies or competencies that we use today. Of course, a company might have a list of 20 or 30 core competencies. I'm not talking about those. What I'm really talking about is, for example, being lean. And we've been working on being lean for quite a long time, many decades, and companies have really done a pretty good job. However, you can always take lean to the next level, and the missing competency helps you to do that. I'll come back on that in a second. Secondly, we are working hard at being agile. And I think we're putting, for the most part, most companies are thinking agility is the best way to counter the increasing exponential changes that are coming our way. And that's good, but I was just with the Fortune 50 CIOs in a meeting held by Cisco. And so we have the largest CIOs in the world there. And I just asked them, how many of you already have an agile organization? They all put their hands up. And I said, well, that's good. I mean, there's no competitive advantage, obviously, but that's good. But a bigger thing to ask yourself is agility. What is the advantage? Lean, being lean, good. I'm glad you're doing it. You need to be doing that. And you can take it to the next level. Being agile is good, but once again, the guys who started Uber didn't use agility to come up with Uber, and the guys who came up with Airbnb didn't use agility to come up with their concepts, and so on. But they will help you react faster, which is good. There will continue to be a lot of incoming change. One last one I'll point out is execution. And we all think execution is everything. But I would say BlackBerry was really good at execution, and so is Microsoft, Dell, Sony, HP, and a host of others that have been struggling. So what is the missing competency? And the missing competency is the ability to anticipate. And anticipate what? You can anticipate disruptions before they disrupt. You can anticipate problems before you have them so that you can pre-solve them. And you can anticipate game-changing opportunities before the competition notices if you have a methodology. And that is what I'd love to talk to our listeners about today, is to help teach them some of that methodology.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, because I think that's what a great starting point, because I bought a bunch of books recently, and I'm trying to sort of rapidly try to understand these lean principles and agile thinking and organizational development, but I like how you're sort of even in front of that, talking about the ability to anticipate. So, yeah, continue on. It sounds great.
Yes, well, this is based in just a little bit of background to where I got to this point. Before starting the 6 companies that I've started, I taught biology and physics. And I only mention that so that you know that this is all based on research and over a period of 34 years. So I came up with the methodology which I call separating hard trends. Those are future facts. Those are the things that will happen. You can see them ahead of time. They will happen, and no matter who you are, you cannot stop them. Then there are soft trends. And soft trends are all based on assumptions, unlike hard trends, which are based on future facts. And there are several different levels of assumptions. I'll just mention them very quickly. But to make it simple, I call them a hard assumption, which is research-based, and a soft assumption, which makes sense, but you didn't research it, which means higher level of risk. So first of all, just if you think about that a minute, in a world of mass uncertainty, which we have today, you have to ask yourself, are you certain of nothing? And the answer is, well, you can be certain of quite a bit. I remember meeting several CEOs and before I was speaking, and they said, of course, well, no one can predict the future and be right. And I responded by saying, it's summer, next will be fall. Hey, I think I'll be right. Now what I was doing was I was pointing out that there's a science of cycles. There's actually over 300 known cycles, business cycles, weather cycles, biological cycles. For example, can an astronomer tell you in the year 2040 in March the exact moment we'll have a full moon? And the answer is, yeah, they can nail it. So you can't say the future is unpredictable. It's far beyond death and taxes. Now, economists use cyclical change as a way of predicting the future, and it's worked quite well until recently because, as you know, economists have been increasingly wrong. Why? And that is, there's another kind of change. It used to be so slow that economists didn't need to know about it, but today it's changing our world on us left and right. I would call it one-way, linear, elevated to exponential change. Now, again, this is a one-way change. It's not a cycle. Once you get a smartphone, you're not going back to a dumb phone. That's not a cycle. Once the people in China park their bicycle and get a car, they're not going back to the bike. Once the people in India get refrigeration for their home, they're not going to go back to no refrigeration. These are one-way and driven exponentially now by technological change that have profound opportunities as well as predictable consequences. So again, 30 years ago, I came up with this methodology of separating the hard trends from the soft trends. Because let's face it, Bill, there's no shortage of trends. You can get them from all over the place. The internet is full of trends. The key is which ones are going to happen and which ones aren't. That's the science that I've got 34 years behind that works. And so let's talk about it a little further.
Okay.
Just to kind of make this clear, let's give you an example of hard and soft real quickly. When Bitcoin first came out, that was the first cyber currency, there was a lot of people that were saying, wow, this is the future. Bitcoin is the future. And by the way, Bitcoin is still there doing quite well. But I pointed out in the early article when that came out that Bitcoin's success and future success is a soft trend. That's an assumption. We don't know that for sure. The hard trend is cyber currency. Once cyber currency, and that was the first one, once that genie got out of the box, it was not going back in.
Sure.
And I even said there will be more cyber currencies, and today we have over 170 cyber currencies. So another quick example just to help our listeners understand baby boomers, demographics. Baby boomers are not going to all of a sudden start getting younger again. They're going to continue to age. That's a hard trend, and we can tell a lot about the future based on that. Or let's take, are we going to get more government regulations? And the answer is, well, yes. As a matter of fact, you can't predict all of the future. Of course you can't. Actually, that'd be quite boring. But what this hard trend, soft trend methodology does is allows you to predict accurately enough of the future to see quite a bit.
So quick question for you, Dan. In regards to your previous example of Bitcoin, so Bitcoin you would say is a soft trend, and how would you put blockchain and digital ledgering into that? Would that be something that's a clear hard trend, or is that?
Yes, you nailed it. It's a clear hard trend. It will spawn other business models that might be good or might be bad. I mean, take a look at Google. Is Google's leadership in search, let's say, since that's their core, is that leadership a hard trend or soft trend? And the answer, of course, is it's a soft trend. Depends on Google. As a matter of fact, in 1998, the leader of search was Yahoo. So, and nobody would have thought that Yahoo could have been unseated by that until a couple of guys formed Google. So the idea of a soft trend doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that it is not a future fact. Let's go back to future facts a second. Will we see increasing virtualization of services as well as products? And the answer is yes, and that's not going to stop. Increasing use of the cloud, putting heavy hardware up in the cloud. Oh, yes. By the way, the cloud's not going to get full. And after 3G and after 4G and after 5G, is that it? Well, no. We're going to have 6G followed by 7G. Those are future facts. As a matter of fact, I've been tracking those since 1983, and they've been on a predictable curve. That, Bill, leads me to another thing I came up with back in 83 when I founded Burris Research, and that is I came up with the time frame element. And back in 83, when I started the company and sold off the other 5 that I'd started, I came across something pretty obscure back then. It was called Moore's Law. And, of course, today, people know about Moore's Law, but I can tell you in 83, not many were looking at Moore's Law.
Right.
And when I saw Moore's Law, processing power doubles every 18 months as the price drops in half, I realized, wow, that guy nailed it. And as a forecaster, that gave me a powerful tool. For example, if you go back to me in 83, I could look at the year 2000, and with that law, I would know how powerful a computer would be and how much it would cost. Once I know those 2 things, I could make a lot of accurate predictions, which I did. Matter of fact, one of my 1983 predictions is we would sequence the human gene code in the year 2000, which we did. Well, that was an 83 prediction. They didn't even start doing it until 1990. So again, you can be quite accurate when you have that. But I needed more than Moore's Law back then, so I came up with a law of bandwidth and a law of storage. I called them the 3 digital accelerators. So why didn't Apple release the iPhone a year earlier? They could have actually, but why didn't they? And the answer is bandwidth, storage, and processing power were those 3, that trifecta, were not ready yet. They would have given you a lousy user experience. Why didn't we have, let's say, TED Talks a couple of years sooner? The answer is those 3 would have given you a bad experience. That's why when Netflix came out, they were still mailing out DVDs. They needed those 3 digital accelerators to be at the right point for them to offer streaming.
I see.
And by the way, if you look at my 1993 bestseller, Technotrends, there's a little section in the book that says Blockbuster is busted, and if you read underneath it, I'm describing streaming media and Netflix and putting some accurate timeframes on it, as well as things like the iPhone. So what I'm getting at is it's actually much more predictable than we think if we can look at, again, the hard trends and then put those timeframes on there. One last point I'll make about the controversy this last year about processing power and Moore's Law, whether that's dead or not. And the reality is that don't think of it as processing power, think of it as computing power. Because now, of course, we're tapping into supercomputers in the cloud from our devices. And it's not so much about the processing chip in the device, it's more about the computing power that you have from your device. And by the way, that will continue to be exponential.
Well, even if they run into chip limitations with quad-core processing and such, which is known, there's quantum computing, which is right around the corner. That'll change the game again.
Yeah, and I won't get all into it now because I work with companies like the Intels and others, and they know that really there's not an end to it. But in terms of exponential computing power, again, don't think just in terms of the chip itself. And one of the things they're doing is using the supercomputers to design the new chips. And the new chips are put into new supercomputers that then are smarter and can design the new chips. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And as you say, we've got other tools like quantum and other things happening right now.
So the missing competency, Daniel, what is the missing competency? It's the ability to anticipate. And that's what you're saying is that these trends. So now we can, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. For example, did someone say years and years ago, hey, don't tell Kodak about digital photography. Let's keep that a secret from them. And the answer is, well, no, it was there. Unfortunately, they treated it as a soft trend. Oops, that was a hard trend. So knowing the difference can make all of the difference when you learn how to separate those things. So the core of anticipation is understanding hard trends from soft trends. And I did describe that quite well in my last New York Times bestseller, Flash Foresight, for those that are interested in learning a little bit more beyond this.
I think that the Flash Foresight was very interesting, and one of the pieces that came out of it for me is really mapping this down to an individual level. And I'm really curious. So when you're working, and I'll get into some of my more specific questions, but I want to start at the top. When you're working with C-suite executives, where do you see this? You're talking about missing competency from an organization and looking at hard, soft trends. What about individuals? What are we missing here? Is this, like, if you're born to be an NBA basketball player, you sort of have a DNA inclination towards a certain level of athleticism. Is this the same thing when you're talking about the ability to use your mind to think about the future and then map business to that future?
Well, actually, it is quite personal, and I do want to talk about that. And you actually brought up a couple of different elements there when you brought in the basketball playing, which I can talk about as well. But let's stay with, first of all, from a business standpoint, the hard trend, soft trend methodology I've used with, the top 25 of GE, the top 40 of IBM, and so on, and it's really changed how they plan and innovate. So it's been embraced by the largest companies. I actually am a strategic advisor to the Joint Chiefs and the DoD, and they have, as of last year, embraced it as well. So it's so becoming anticipatory is something that is rapidly being embraced by some of the biggest and the largest organizations around the world. So I do want to say it's not a theory; it's actually in practice and creating results. So now let's take it to personal level, and that is uncertainty, personal strategy, as well as corporate strategy. If it's based on uncertainty, you've got high levels of risk. But if it's based on certainty, you have low levels of risk. So you have to really start asking yourself, what am I certain about? And, the stock market is a cyclical. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up. We know that. So again, separating the cyclical chains from the one-way linear / exponential changes is extremely important to do on a personal level as well. Let's take your own credit card in your wallet or in your purse. We put a chip on that. But what is the chip in a credit card? It is the DVD just before streaming. And of course, in other words, it's obsolete already, but there's still people making money on it, so that's why they're doing it. But in reality, having it be in our smartphones with multiple biometrics for security is where we're going to be putting those things. For example, if all the shoppers a couple of years ago from Kmart would have been using, let's just say, the iPhone and Apple Pay, although they could have been using one of the other ones, there would have been nothing to hack because it creates a one-time number, but it does not share credit card information or personal information with the person you're selling to. And of course, I mentioned multiple biometrics. Right now, let's just take the iPhone since I mentioned it. You've got the fingerprint reader, but that phone, all the phones, have a really good camera. Well, now you got facial recognition, and that's extremely good. Plus, you got voice recognition, and that's really good. Plus, you got heartbeat recognition, which is as good as a fingerprint, and a number of others. So we will be using multiple biometrics depending on the level of security. And let's just be futurists now as between you and I. And just think, let me ask you, if we're putting our credit cards in there because that's more secure, and it is, what other things do you carry in your purse or wallet might you want to put in there that would be important? And it doesn't take long to start thinking, well, some people still carry around their Social Security card. Whoa, that'd be a good thing to have in there instead of in your wallet or purse. What about your passport? Well, that'd be a better thing to have in there. And what about your driver's license? Well, that'd be better in there as well. So you can start to see where we're going once you start thinking about it just a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. And so basically when you're coaching and working and advising people at a very high level in the business, you're really trying to make the future seem very, very logical for them so that they can be more unencumbered when they are acting and when they're taking action on their plans.
Yes, Bill, a really important thing I want to make clear for our listeners is that you cannot predict everything. By the way, again, that'd be a boring world if everything was predictable, but you can't predict everything. That's why it's important to understand and be good at being agile, because agility helps you with change that's coming from the outside in. What being anticipatory does is allows you to drive change from the inside out based on the confidence that certainty can provide. So when you do find things you can be certain about, what you have is the confidence to make bold moves. And secondly, there's risk management. So really, this has changed how people manage risk. Again, if you look at your assumptions, those soft trends, are the assumptions hard or soft? Well, if you've got soft assumptions, you've got much, in other words, they make sense, but they weren't researched. You have much higher levels of risk than a researched assumption, although neither is a future fact. If we looked at future facts, then we can start to see, then you have low risk and the ability to jump ahead with low risk. Think of it this way, with keeping up is a fool's game. What I mean by that is, what's the advantage of keeping up? I still have yet to hear that. So what do you want to do? You want to jump ahead, but that also had high risk. But if you use that hard trend, soft trend way of looking at the future, you can jump ahead with low risk based on the things that you do know instead of all the things you don't know.
And also with micro experiments too, Daniel. I mean, you can take measured risk based on experiments within the different pathways.
Absolutely. And I think going with this, again, on a personal level, hard trends or soft trends, it's kind of like, what do you know instead of what don't you know? What are the things you are certain about instead of all the things you're uncertain about? And when you're looking at a trend, what you want to do is to make it come to life, you have to add an opportunity to it. So let's say that you might say, we're having an increasing number of people, baby boomers, retiring. And, we've even got statistics on that, so we can see, we have a tsunami of baby boomers retiring. And that has some predictable consequences. But there's also predictable opportunities. Because again, there's two sides to every coin. There's the consequences and the opportunities. So in that, we can ask ourselves, what's the opportunity? Because if you just say that, a lot of baby boomers retiring, it's like, oh, heck, Bill knew that. Everybody else listening to this knew that. Big deal. So what? But if you tie it to an opportunity for you, for example, if you have people retiring, do you have a mentoring program that's really well so you can capture some of that knowledge before they leave? Have you got an opportunity, for example, of, let's say, some of the people that are leaving to be able to work from their home a couple hours a week, mentoring some of the younger people? So you see what I mean? Have you created a knowledge base and a wisdom base? Or do you only have databases and information bases? Do we even know what the differences are? Again, those are things that I talk about in the book and in our learning system.
You also wrote not too long ago, Daniel, about a chief innovation officer versus a chief information officer, which might be kind of an extension of what you were just talking about. Do we just have information or we have wisdom? And what I was curious about is I've started to think about this in terms of offense and defense. And so from an innovation point of view, what did you mean by a chief innovation officer? And do you mean someone who starts to get really good at anticipating trends more from an offensive for the business or more in defense of process improvement or process innovation?
Yes. So the reason I did that is we're at a unbelievable tipping point in human history. This is a point that we have never reached ever before in human history because of the 3 digital accelerators, because of the exponential nature of the transformational, not change, but the transformations that are taking place right now. In other words, I'll give you a short-range prediction, and it's based on hard trends, so if you don't like it, too bad, it's going to happen anyway. and that is that in the next 5 years, and by the way, that 5 years is going by fast, we are transforming, not changing. We are transforming every business process, how we sell, how we market, how we communicate, how we innovate, how we train, how we educate, how we pay for things. All of our business process will be transformed because we have the tools to do it. Now, that's the hard trend. Now, here's the soft trend. To you listening to me, the listener now, will you transform the business processes in your organization? That is a soft trend. I don't know. That's up to you. But the good thing about a soft trend is you can influence it. You see, I can't change a hard trend, but I can change a soft trend. I can influence it. So if there's a negative element to a soft trend, I can work on that. Let me give you a quick example. The U.S. government did some research recently to look at healthcare in the future, given all the baby boomers that are getting older, that hard trend. And they wanted to see how many people would be obese in the year 2025 because obesity has been rising as a trend for the last 15 years. How many people would have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes? Those have all been going up dramatically over the last 10 years. And they wanted to see, given that trend, where are we going to be in 2025? And they came up with a number. And why? Because they wanted to put their efforts into how can we pay for that? And I would say all of those are soft trends. Why? They can all be influenced, every one of them. I'd rather put my money on how do we change those soft trends instead of figuring out how we're going to pay for them in 2025. Because you see, so it creates something that's very powerful.
It's hard is something that's in place. So you're transforming a business process over the next 5 years. That's going to happen. The soft trend, the one we can influence. Can you just repeat what the soft trend is?
Yeah. The hard trend is the tools to transform every business process are there over this next 5 years. And we can do that. Anyone can do that. As a matter of fact, you're not limited by the size of the organization. A one-person shop can do that. The soft trend is, will you?
Okay, that makes a lot more. That makes sense. I totally understand that.
So you see, there's an old saying, if it is to be, it's up to me. So you still have to take action in this case. But the key is, once again, it's recognizing what those hard trends are. Like, for example, we really haven't seen much in the way of augmented reality. The early augmented reality is you hold your smartphone up, use the camera, and you point it, and you can see data overlaid what you're pointing at. And that is augmented reality, a hard trend. That's a technology hard trend that is going to be growing at an exponential rate. But instead of just holding your camera up, you will use your glasses, because we had Google Glass, which of course was kind of ugly and techie and nerdy. But being able to have augmented reality regular glasses where you just move your finger on the side where it goes to your ear, left and right or up and down, to be able to control whether you're seeing it clear or you're putting data in front of you, that's hard trend. That's happening. You could even put time frames on that. Just like we've got smart watches, but that's just one element of wearables, smart tattoos that stick on and come off for all sorts of different uses. Internet of Things with all of the sensors, wireless and wired sensors. All of those are hard trends that are providing, again, great opportunity. And also there's problems, because there's two sides to every coin. The key is taking a look at both sides of that coin. Don't look at just one side. Take a look at both sides. Usually we see the negative side. So the three categories of hard trends I'll share with your listeners is technology. And by the way, is a little something, if anyone is interested, I've been publishing for 34 years now. You could go to Burrus, BURRUS.com, and I have a list of 25 technology-driven trends that are growing exponentially you could download for free. But you also have demographics. And remember, it's not just about baby boomers. You got to think of Generation Z, not just the millennials, and the impacts that are fully predictable. And then you have to take a look at government regulations, and that's one I thought I would surprise you with, but that's another one that creates hard trends. And someone would say, well, you surely can't predict any regulations. I mean, in this country, we have no idea who's going to be in, and even if whoever gets in, how would we know what'll happen? And I would say, well, you can't predict everything, but you can predict quite a bit. Let me just prove it to you using regulations, which seem to be completely unpredictable, but again, they aren't. Will we have increasing globalization of auditing and accounting regulations? The answer is absolutely. Doesn't matter who gets in. Will we have increasing regulation around cybersecurity? Well, absolutely. Doesn't matter who gets in, because there are hard trends that are driving that whoever's in has to deal with, or we all go down. So
absolutely.
So you see, you can't predict it all, but you can predict a lot. And you don't have to predict everything accurately, but you have to predict enough.
So now you gave what I found a very interesting TED Talk that I had watched on solving impossible problems and seeing invisible solutions to impossible problems, and this concept of skipping the problem. Now, I'm curious, from when you're working with C-suite executives, of which the CIO, whether we call it the innovation officer or the information officer, there's a digital partner in that group, hopefully. Where do the impossible problems lie for them right now? Like, how do you teach people how to skip problems at the highest level in organizations?
Yeah, and it's I love doing that. It's one of my favorites. You might know, out of the 6 companies I've started, 3 were national leaders in the first year and 5 were profitable in the first year. So I practice what I preach here. And I would say that there are a couple of elements to it, but to use this as a teaching moment, whatever problem you've got right now, no matter how big, no matter how impossible, that's not it. That's not it. You're working on the wrong one. That's why it's so impossible. That's why you can't solve it. You have to dig down. You have to peel the onion back to get to the core, to find what the real problem is, which is there and perfectly solvable. Remember, I mentioned in the beginning of this interview, I was meeting with the top 50 CIOs at this conference, and I spoke to them first, and then there was a little breakout where I was going to be talking to them about rapid problem solving. And I'll tell you how I started it. Again, we got the top 50 CIOs there, and I said, any one of you, I'm going to show you how to solve impossible problems. So why don't you give me your impossible problems right now? I'll help you find a solution right now, and then I'll show you how to do it. So I won't tell you who it is, but it was one of the largest in the room, really big. Wow. And he said, well, I've got to get all of my legacy systems into the cloud as quickly as possible. That's my biggest problem. And when he said that, I responded by saying, let me see now, if you get all of your legacy systems into the cloud, won't you just have a legacy cloud? And he did, Bill, exactly what you did. He laughed and said, well, I guess that's not it. And I said, you're right. And then we started digging down to what it really was. So you see, it's kind of like years ago, I was meeting with the CEO and his team of Eli Lilly and asked what the biggest problem was. And they said, we got to hire 2,000 additional PhD researchers, but we don't have the budget because our stock price is down. But we got to hire them, and that's important. So I knew that wasn't it. So I started peeling the onion back by asking why. Why do you need to do that? And he said, well, we're a drug company. To get our stock prices in relation to how many new drugs are in the pipeline, to get new drugs in the pipeline, we have to solve molecular problems. To do that, we need researchers. Our pipeline is low. That's why we don't have the budget right now. And to really beef it up rapidly, we figure we got to hire 2,000 PhD researchers now. Again, budget is the problem. Whenever I hear budget is the problem, I already know that's not the problem. Money is never the real problem. And if you think money is your problem, that's why you have never been able to solve it. So what I did was suggested, why don't we just skip that? Why don't we just put all of the molecular problems on the internet and say we, in multiple languages, say we pay for solutions? Well, they did that. Oh, boy, this is probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. And they started really getting great results. As a matter of fact, it ended up being written up in the Harvard Business Review, and a lot of people are using that. A lot of organizations probably listening to this are using that right now. The point is, was the problem related to having to hire 2,000 researchers? And the answer is, well, no. That wasn't the problem. That's why he couldn't solve it. On a simple personal level, I had my niece, Hallie, call and said, I can't save any money, Uncle Dan. She has her first job. And her older sister can really save money like crazy. So she was frustrated. She says, I'm really working hard at trying to save money, but I just can't seem to save money. And I said, well, no wonder you're working on the wrong problem. Why don't you work at how you spend money? You'll save money by default. And of course, working on how you spend is a lot better than working on how you save, because it's all about the spending. It's usually not about trying to save.
So do you have a particular personal discipline or personal process you use to keep your mind agile in this way? So when you're presented, either a client presents you with a problem or you have your own personal business or personal problem, do you journal it through? Do you have a process, some way, shape, or form that you go through?
Yeah, well, I definitely do not have an agile process, because I would not help them with a transformational answer. So what I have is an anticipatory process. It really is important to understand there is a big difference there. And so what I'm doing is, in talking with them, I have several elements to it. One, again, I know to separate hard trend certainties from soft trends, ifs or maybes. Secondly, I know that whatever problem they have, that's not it. And there is a way to get them to the real problem, which is fully solvable quite quickly when you understand the process. I understand that we're not in a period of change anymore. We're now in a period of transformation. So if you're only changing a process, product, or service right now, you're actually falling behind every year. You need to be transforming it. Most companies don't know the difference. I try to help them know the difference. We're in a time of redefining and reinventing every product and service. And I know that there are the tools to do that right now. So what I do is use some of those things I just mentioned to you as part of that process of being anticipatory.
And how would someone know if they're only making a change and not a transformation? Like would there be a governor valve internally that would switch? Go, oh, that's right, I'm in a change mode. I'm not actually really trying to transform here. Is there?
Sure, absolutely. If you're changing something, your change looks similar to the thing you were changing. If you're transforming it, it doesn't look like it at all. Let me give you an example. When I was a young guy, I could listen to one album per spinning disc, 33 1/3. So I can listen to my Jimi Hendrix and my Pink Floyd and all that stuff. You know my age now. As I got older, a change came along, a technological change. I could listen to one album per smaller spinning disc called a CD. And I liked that change. Not just because of the size. I liked it because it got rid of the hisses and pops and scratches of my old music. So I got all my old music, all my new music on CD. Cool. That changed how I listen to music. Today I've got all my music in my phone, and it didn't change how I listen to music. It transformed it. And that doesn't resemble a physical spinning disc anymore. I can have, matter of fact, thanks to the cloud in my phone, I can have access to infinite songs and music anytime I want them. That doesn't resemble the past, which was a limited disc with a limited number of tracks. That is something that is completely different. So transformation means it doesn't resemble the thing that you have moved from. Change, it resembles it. You tweaked it. You modified it.
Gotcha. Makes sense. That makes tons of sense. Well, as we wrap up, I had a question for you regarding, so the neuroscience and our understanding of the brain as we go forward here is also exponentially changing, and our knowledge of health and wellness. How do you counsel leaders both in regards to what are the key factors to optimize their personal ability to remain healthy and be able to take on the essentially the uncontrollable now in regard with technology change?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of elements that you mentioned in there that we could talk about, but I think the core of it is that from a health standpoint, most of us know what we need to do. We just don't do it because we get busy. And actually, Bill, that's my biggest worry for the people that are listening to this right now. You're all really busy, and you're going, after you're done listening to this, you're going to go back and get busy again. And remember, today in this world of no longer being in change, but being in exponentially driven transformation, you can busy yourself right out of business. So I think it's important to build in time for your health, build in time in your calendar. Actually, somebody asked me what my most valuable application was out of all the applications I have, and I said it's my calendar, because that's how I make sure things happen, even the white space I need to think and the fun space I need to enjoy. Because if you don't do it, maybe it won't happen, especially if you're entrepreneurial like I am. So I think, we just need to keep that in our consciousness, and also be aware that there are some hard trends, both around genomics and proteinomics and cosmeceuticals and all kinds of different things that will give us the ability to do some amazing things with our health. However, we got to have the core, and that takes some daily routine. So that's but I would be aware of those hard trends that are allowing us to do things that we couldn't do before from a health standpoint. I like genetics and so on. In '83, when I first said that we would be in a period of exponential change, and in '83, and not many people were talking about exponential change back then, but that's because it was in the slow part of the curve, and it was predictable going to get higher. Well, now we're in that high part of the curve. We're in that holy cow phase of the curve. And it's important to realize we are in a tipping point in a unique period of time. And going back to the chief innovation officer versus the chief information officer, we're standing at the base of a mountain of technology-driven change, and it is really a base of a mountain that is full of innovation. And we should be taking advantage of it. I think we need someone that understands technology at the C-suite that can help drive innovation, product and service innovation. That is why I suggested the chief information officer really be the chief innovation officer, because we need a C-suite person that knows how to do that. Secondly, in that same Harvard Business Review article that I wrote, or actually a second one, I talked about the chief technology officer needs to be the chief transformation officer. Because as I said, we're going to transform every business process. Someone at the C-suite who understands technology ought to be driving that internal transformation. And so I think that's a good role for that one.
Well, I'm definitely going to link up on the show notes to our discussion on the show notes page. I'll link out to those articles plus to burst.com. And in addition to that, you have that training program, which I found very, very interesting. They call it Building the Anticipatory Organization, which is that missing competency pieces. Is there anything else that you want to let the listeners know about how to reach you after we're done?
Sure. I think if you liked what we talked about, I know you would like Flash Foresight. It's been a New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it's a required read. So I think by many companies, I think you'd really enjoy it. And if you go to Burrus, BURRUS.com, you'll find quite a few resources. I think I've got a couple of million monthly blog readers. I think you'll find it good. Also, I'm one of the influencers on LinkedIn. I think I have just under 800,000 connections there. So I think that might be a place I write a couple of articles a week there. Another place you could follow me.
How did you get so many LinkedIn 800,000? When I saw that, I was stunned. I was like, gosh, I have to ask you that question. How did you go from, I have several thousand, but not 800,000?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think I'm in the top 35 in the world right now, but basically it's providing value, giving insights. I do a lot of posting and writing that trying to help people either see the hard trend game changers that they should be aware of, or sharing strategies like the skip it principle that I shared with you. And I've got many that I've worked out over the years, or describing, some of the, what I did to drive rapid results from some of the various businesses that either I had myself or that companies I'm working with.
Well, Daniel, I very much appreciate our time together, and I know my listeners are going to be so enthusiastic to listen to our discussion, and I'll link out to all of these resources on our show notes page, and I appreciate you for your time today and your support in the community and to your holding all of us to a bigger vision of what's possible.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Bye-bye. So there you have it. That was my interview with Daniel Burrus. I'm super excited to keep finding these top leaders around the world. So if you have recommendations of people that you would love me to interview, please let me know. Follow me on Twitter at @BExponential, also on LinkedIn, and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Figure out a way to do it, please. And it's just super fantastic to help, because a lot of these top leaders want to know the impact of the show around the world, because they want their message. So the bigger the leader, the bigger they want that message to be from the show's reach. So your comments are incredibly helpful, because the fancy algorithms that Stitcher and iTunes use are based on feedback from the crowd, from the community, from you. So your feedback's my oxygen. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your time and attention. This is Bill Murphy signing out. Until next time. Thank you. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.